I will show for 5 minutes an example of method development and validation data, wherein a method development and validation are done for a pesticide. Then we will move on to the next, that is the steps in pesticide residue analysis. Actually, I will divide that into two. The first part will deal with up to extraction part. The analytical part we will complete tomorrow. So that's the agenda for today. I will just share the slide and I will just show you. I uploaded all the videos into the Moodle. If you need further clarifications, you refer the classes in the Moodle so that you get more clarity on what is being taught. So I have shared the content. Can you see it? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. This is the first thing. We are going for specificity. We know different concentration. We will inject 5 to 6 times, and we will note down the retention time as well as area. Here, just a minute, I will show you. Just a minute. Okay, this is selectivity. Here we can see different concentrations ranging from 0.01. Actually, point microgram per ml is ppm. 0.01 ppm to 0.1 ppm, different concentration. Each concentration we have injected first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and you can see the retention time at each interval: first injection, second injection, third injection, fourth and fifth injection, sixth injection. And see, you can see slight change in the retention time with each injection. And here also, peak area also, there is a slight variation. We got the average, we got the standard deviation, and we worked out percent relative standard deviation. Percent relative standard deviation is got by dividing the standard deviation by average. Standard deviation is 50.77 divided by average into 100 will give this percent relative standard deviation. And for the retention time, again we will work out just ഒരു ചെറിയ കാര്യത്തിനായിരുന്നു അത് നടന്നു കുഴപ്പമില്ല. ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ എങ്ങനെയുണ്ടായിരുന്നു എക്സാം? ഏത് ജയ്ഭാരതില എക്സാം തുടങ്ങി നടന്നോ കഴിഞ്ഞോ? ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ ഓൾ ദി ബെസ്റ്റ്, നന്നായിട്ട് ചെയ്തു. So for retention time and area, this is the area. We calculate standard deviation, relative standard deviation, and we have seen the relative standard deviation for peak area should be less than 5, written over here. So for all the concentration it's less than 5, and for retention time it should be less than 2. So that is over here. This is the selectivity part. Then we have gone for the linearity. See, different concentrations we have injected, and this is the peak area. Just give the concentration, give the peak area, then you give a linear, draw a linear graph, then ask the Excel to give the equation. It will give the equation. It will give the it will give the R square. If the R square is greater than 0.9, there is a linear increase in peak area with an increase in concentration. So that is the data which we have got. And next we got for accuracy, we go went for recovery studies. So this is 3 replicate, and see this is the concentration which we have added into the metrics. I will just give, yesterday I didn't explain what is metrics and metrics match standard. Actually, whenever we are going for pesticide residue analysis, first we will inject clean standard or neat standard. Where is Safna? Yes, okay. Whenever we are going for pesticide residue analysis, first we will have analysis of the clean or neat standard. There is nothing in that, only the pesticide alone. But as I told you yesterday, there can be interferences from the matrix. That means if you're analyzing tomato, there can be compounds in the tomato which can interfere with our analysis. If you're analyzing bindi, it can have something. If you're analyzing bitter gourd, it can lead to some interferences. So in order to know that, we will go for a matrix standard, matrix match standard. That means we will add the standard pesticide, a known concentration of the pesticide, into the matrix. That means the sample. For tomato, we will do, for whatever commodities we do, we go for it. Ideally. So if your lab is testing say 20 or 30 commodities, for all the 30 commodities, we will prepare an extract and we will add known quantity of standard into it. Then we will go for accuracy studies. Here we will study the recovery, and again we will check for any interference. So this is matrix match standard. This is what we is given over here. This is the concentration which is added, and see the recovery. In all the 3 replicates, we got around more than 90% recovery. So the criteria is it should be recovery should be lying within 70 and 120%. So this is also passed. Then we go for calculation of limit of detection and limit of quantification. This is basically, it is taken from an Excel sheet. Actually, we work it out in an Excel sheet. Here we have the linearity graph. We have worked it out that. So the limit of detection equation is 3 into standard deviation by slope. Limit of quantification is 10 into standard deviation by slope. So we got the average standard deviation of the response. That I will show you. We have got it over here. See, average of standard deviation. The average of this standard deviation which we have got, that is given. We know the slope. Slope is given over here. Y is equal to bx. B is the slope. So 3 to 7396. I'll show you the, yes. This is the slope. 3 to 7396 is not visible over here. So that slope it's over here. So 3 into standard deviation by slope will give the LOD as 0.0328. LOQ 10 into standard deviations by slope. We got the LOQ. So the repeatability, reproducibility, and ruggedness and all that we can do it. But up to LOD, LOQ specificity, linearity and all, that is the one which we have to be careful about. Are you clear about this method development and validation? Then I will go into the steps in pesticide residue analysis. Yes or no? Yes. Why no response from anyone? Swati, Safna, Bindu has given this message.
No, sir, some network issues. No, sir. I was.
Swati?
Sir.
Okay,
Hello.
fine. Just wanted to ensure all 3 are there. Okay. Then we are moving on to steps in pesticide residue analysis. Actually, the steps I have listed it out include experimentation, sampling, extraction, cleanup, analysis, and interpretation of data. I will repeat: experimentation, sampling, extraction, cleanup, analysis, and interpretation of data. So, though I have enlisted 6 steps, normally we will have only 5 steps. We don't normally do experimentation all the time. This experimentation part is mainly done by research organizations. Say whenever we want to work the MRL value or the waiting period data of any particular pesticide, then only we will go for experimentation. Otherwise, routine in the case of Vellanikara lab, our lab, we don't go for any experimentation. In case of some students' work, we may go for some experimentation. Otherwise, routinely we don't go for any experiment. But Vellaini lab, because of the ACRP mandate, there if they have a new pesticide, they want some company wants to register a new pesticide, they will go for experimentation. Otherwise, we start with sampling only. So sampling, extraction, cleanup, analysis, and interpretation of data. Here, one more difference occurred recently, maybe around 10, 12 years back. The extraction and cleanup is now combined. Earlier, extraction was another step, cleanup was another step. All of them were extremely tedious process. So I did during my PhD program, I did this pesticide residue analysis course in IRA. That course is offered by the Agriculture Chemicals Department. That course is a 3+2 course. So that is the volume of that course. That is handled by persons who are working in residue analysis alone. Dr. V.T. Gejbiye, who retired as the head of the Department of Agriculture Chemicals, was the course leader. Then there was Dr. Irani Mukherjee, Dr. Meera Singh, Dr. Shashibala Singh. All of them were stalwarts in residue analysis. So they were handling this course. So they used to conduct practicals. Practicals used to extend over 3 hours, 4 hours, and all. And each and every pesticide, remember, each and every pesticide we had separate extraction protocol, separate cleanup protocol. If someone developed a multi-residue method, that means a method by which you can extract, clean up, and analyze 4 or 5 pesticide at a single go, that was considered as an extremely good method. So that was the kind of analysis at that time. But nowadays, there are labs which are carrying out analysis of about 100 to 200 pesticides at a time. Certain labs go up to 400 pesticides at a time. That means with a single sample, they extract 400, they have the capability to extract 400 pesticides, clean up 400 pesticides, and analyze 400 pesticides in a single analysis. Maybe they use two or three different instrumentation, but analysis is process, analytical process is a single process. So this is the earlier it was not that all these things, extraction method, cleanup method, and all were extremely cumbersome. Usually it consumed lot of solvents, very tedious process. A single, I still remember one extraction itself will take 1.5 hours. Now extraction, cleanup, and all very quick. So that was advancements that took place over a period of time. But for certain commodities, especially say water, this extraction and cleanup still goes with the older technique, not the new methods and all. So we will go it one by one. What are the steps? The first is experimentation. This is just like a research study. We'll lay out the plot. Usually in RBD, because we go for field trials, not for CRD. CRD is pot culture. Sometimes, if the experiment demands, we can go for CRD. Otherwise, for field crops, we go for RBD only. Along with the control plot, that all things you know, just in an RBD layout with a control plot. But one thing that is different from the usual experimentation, field experimentation, is that the distance between the two plots will be higher than the greater than the usual distance from the two plots. Because if you are carrying out a spray in a plot, we should ensure that the drift does not fall over to the plot near to it, adjacent to it. So to prevent the drift falling over to the adjacent plot, which may receive another treatment, we may give sufficient space between the plots. That is the usual. That means a slightly greater distance between the plots than the usual experimental speed. Okay, fine. Shall I move to the next step? Experimentation is this much only. This is because that's the one which we normally do. Only thing is the difference.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next one is the sampling. So sampling, I told you, if we want to go for analyze the residues in a commodity, you don't analyze the entire commodity. We take a representative sample from a population. We take a representative sample. That means that sample represents the characteristics of the entire population. So sampling is the method to draw representative sample from a population. So we draw representative sample. So what is the definition of a sample? The definition of a sample is few individuals are drawn from a population by which we study the properties of the entire population. That means if we have 1 ton of rice, we take 1 or 2 kg of rice, and while taking that 1 or 2 kg of rice, we ensure that this 1 or 2 kg represents the entire 1 ton of rice. And that 1 or 2 kg of rice constitute the sample. And by the analyzing that sample, we can say that the properties of or the pesticide residues present or absent in that commodity is this. The same way we go for soil testing, isn't it? In soil testing, if you are going for soil testing or a 1 acre area or a 1 hectare of area, we don't analyze the entire soil. We take samples, we mix it up, we again quarter it, reduce it to about 500 gram to 1 kg, and we make sure that that sample represents the 1 hectare field. So this is the same case over here also. But just like in soil sampling, here also we have to take care of a few things. In soil sampling, you know that if the plots are of different soil types, if the plots are grown with different crops, all those things has to be sampled separately. That means one field you are raising rice, another field you are raising vegetables, then both has to be sampled separately. If one area is slightly raised, another area is slightly low lying, then both areas should be sampled separately. So similarly, in pesticide residue also, we have to take care of few things. Say a farmer is growing brinjal, and that farmer is grow brinjal. He grows 3 different varieties of brinjal. One yellow, one violet, one green, and one white. Then all the 3 varieties should be sampled separately. If you go to a vegetable shop, how many kind of brinjal types you have seen in a vegetable shop based on the shape, color, etc.? If you visit a vegetable shop,
One or two.
1 or 2, what are the kind?
Green one and
Minimum
violet.
3.
That's
Green one and violet. Then what about the shape? Have you seen the round one?
No, sir.
Only long one. You might have studied in UG horticulture, vegetable science, pusa purple round, pusa purple long. I studied that varieties.
Yes, sir. We have
Long
studied, but
one.
never.
Purple, green.
No. Purple, green, white, then long, round, etc. So if we have 2 or 3 different brinjal, if you are going to sample brinjal, if you see in a shop 2 or 3 different okay, okay. For me, my voice is breaking.
Okay.
No, okay. Okay. So in that case, you have to sample the different types of brinjal separately, not clubbed together. Even if you visit the field, if you have different varieties, different cultivars, you have to sample them separately. Then, if you're going to sample from a field, check with the farmer what are all the pesticides used. Sometimes the farmer will say that I had purchased the pesticide A and I tried to spray the area, but I have about 5 acres area. 4 acre I sprayed with that pesticide, but by the time I finished the spraying 4 acres, the pesticide finished, and I had to purchase another one. But at that time, the dealer gave me another pesticide, so the remaining 1 acre I sprayed with another pesticide. In that case, you have to sample those 2 areas separately. Those areas which received different pesticide treatment should be sampled separately. And even if say the farmer, upon inquiry with the farmer says that I sprayed, but it was not completed in a day. So I sprayed the next day in another area. Then, if the spraying happened in different days in the same crop, then again you have to sample it separately. Don't take it as a single sample. So, if the varieties are different, sample separately. If the area different area received different pesticides, go for sample them separately. If the farmer went for spraying in different days, then again go for separate sampling. And when you went for sampling in a watermelon field, so the farmer grows very big watermelons weighing about 8 kg, 9 kg, etc. So you found it extremely difficult to carry that watermelon, pumpkin, etc. into the lab. So you are not supposed to cut, just like in a vegetable shop. You went to a vegetable shop to purchase pumpkin or ash gourd or anything. In Kerala, I don't know about other states. In Kerala, if you go to a vegetable shop, they will may give you smaller pieces of pumpkin, ash gourd, etc. So in the field, if you are trying to sample it, you are not supposed to cut or divide the samples. Just a minute. Sorry, class. So you are not supposed to cut or divide individual sample. You have to take the entire commodity to the lab. So that is another thing with respect to sampling. So these are the things which you have to take care of at the time of sampling. So how we should go about sampling? If you are visiting a field, in a field, you divide that field into 100 imaginary grids, 100 squares. Imaginary, no need to divide it clearly. Just you try to imagine, divide the field into 100 grids and sample it from 10 grids. That means to represent the entire area. That's the only thing. It's not that it's easy to sample from the border area, enter into the border area, gather some fruit or vegetable from there, and you sample. No, it's not that. You have to cover the entire plot, representing the entire plot. And one thing you should try to avoid is do not sample from the beginning or end of the plot. Why? I'm asking a question. Do not sample. I have given a sentence. Avoid taking sampling at the beginning or end of the plot. What can be the reason? This is a practical question. There is nothing.
Spraying from other fields have drifted.
Yes, one thing. Neighboring field, there can be interference. Then that's why whenever we are going for some yield studies, the agronomy, horticulture people, if they go for some field study, they that will have a border effect and all, especially for field crops. Okay. Other than that, say if you are going for spraying for the first time, the farmer may be using the sprayer and the sprayer may not have been washed properly. Yesterday he might have sprayed a fungicide, today he might be spraying an insecticide, and he might not have washed the sprayer properly. So the first area, the beginning of the from where he has started the spraying, may receive residues of the fungicide which he has sprayed a day before. That is one thing from the beginning, one problem with the beginning area. Even if the farmer has sprayed, if farmer has washed the sprayer initially, there will be a quantum of water remaining in the spray lands. I think you know the spray lands and the tube connecting the tank to the spray lands in a sprayer. So there will be a quantum of water remaining inside it. So once you initiate the spraying, for the first few seconds, whatever it is coming is mere water alone. Then only the pesticide solution, which you have filled it now, starts coming. So the beginning of the area, spraying area, will have that problem. And at the end of the plot, what happens is that if a farmer is going over to spraying in an area, at the end, the sprayer might be having a few quantum of pesticide solution remaining, say 1 liter or 1.5 liter. So the usual practice of the farmer is he will remain that area itself and he will spray it over there and finish it, so that the end part of the field will usually receive higher quantum of pesticide. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So this is what you should practically, if a farmer goes on spraying, at the end, some quantity of pesticide will be remaining in the sprayer. So what will do? He will remain there itself and spray it over there and finish it up the spray liquid. So that is what. So that area will have higher concentration of pesticide. So try to avoid sampling because that doesn't constitute the true representative of that area. And the next is sample the part of the crop that constitutes the marketable produce. Here I will take an example of cabbage and cauliflower. How cabbage and cauliflower is marketed by the farmer? I will ask the question, farmer. How it is marketed by the farmer? Is it the same way which we receive from a retailer? Yes or no? Have you ever seen how farmers carry cabbage and cauliflower into the market? No. Swati?
No, sir.
No.
No.
You might have seen in local vegetable vendors remove all the leaves outside from the cauliflower and cabbage. They will retain only a few. But
Yeah.
but a farmer, what he usually does is he harvests the produce with a few leaves outside, 4 or 5 leaves outside, and that commodity is marketed. Now, Bindu and Saudi.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's how the product is marketed. So, if you're going to analyze residues, we should take in the same manner as the farmer is marketing that produce. Do not remove all the outer leaves. Keep just like the farmer harvests the produce from the field. Just like that, you harvest along with that outer leaves, and that thing, entire thing should be analyzed. Even in the lab also, you are not supposed to remove the leaves. Take the case of banana, mango, any fruits, citrus, any fruit. You will remove the rind and eat only the inner content, pulp. But in residue analysis, you won't analyze only the pulp part. You will include the rind also. We will chop the banana along with the rind, and then we will analyze. Because this is the way it is marketed. And we are trying to detect the level of pesticide, and we will compare with the MRL value. MRL is a trade limit. So that means that in the trade, how much pesticide residues is present. So that's the way we should sample the produce, then try to avoid undersized diseased parts and all that we normally do. And once we are sampling, make sure that the surface residue or the dislodgeable residue, we are not removing any surface residue or dislodgeable residue. So we should be careful in handling. So that is one thing. And once you move around the entire field, you got a huge quantity of vegetable or fruit. Don't try to subsample it in the field. Take all the things into the lab, subsample it in the lab. Don't subsample it in the field itself. And whatever be the bags which you are collecting, whatever be the tools which you are using for sampling, all should be clean. So this is sampling. And in the next slide, I will show you how FSSAI has given the different quantity of each fruit and vegetables that should be collected during sampling. See, FSSAI has given for each commodity how much quantity of a fruit or vegetable that should be sampled each time. So take the case of citrus fruits, pomegranate fruits, guava, mango, papaya. The quantity prescribed is 2 kg. But one thing FSSAI has clearly mentioned, you have to take 12 fruits from 4 different trees, and minimum weight should be 2 kg. I will take an example. Say you might have seen certain guava which are extremely bigger in size. Now they call it as Taiwanese guava and all. It will weigh somewhere around 150 grams. So you have collected one guava each from 4 plants. The 4 guava, it weighs somewhere around 3 kg. No, it's not a representative sample. You have to collect from 4 trees, 4 individual trees, and you have to collect minimum of 12 fruits. That means minimum 3 fruits from each tree, and it should be have a weight of minimum of 2 kg, maximum whatever it can be, but minimum of 2 kg. Say, I will take the example of that Nimbu. I don't know the scientific name of citrus. That's the one we prepare lemon juice. That's very smaller in size. One time weigh less than 50 grams. So in that case, you have to sample 4 trees, and you have to sample more number of fruits to take it to 2 kg. So this is how FSSAI has prescribed the sample collection for each and every commodity. For grapes, we have to collect 12 bunches from separate vines. That means from 12 vines, each one we have to take 1 bunch each, and together it should constitute minimum 1 kg. Minimum, it's not maximum. Minimum 1 kg. Pineapple, as you all know, it's a bigger fruit. Minimum of 12 fruits. Banana, FSSAI has prescribed 24 fruits. 2 fingers each from 2 fruits each from the top, middle, and lowest end from a bunch. Top, middle, and low stem. You have to take 2 fingers each. Cabbage and cauliflower, just like pineapple, we need at least 12. Cocoa bits, brinjal, 12 fruits. This is just like guava, papaya, and mango. 12 fruits from 12 separate plants, minimum of 2 kg. So tomato, for small fruited varieties it is 24, large fruited variety it is 12. Again, the minimum is 2 kg. Cereals they prescribe it as 1 kg. So different. I just given a representation table for each and every commodity. Spices and all it is a bit low. It's not 1 kg and all. So are you clear with sampling?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Then next transportation. That is very easy thing. So whatever samples you have collected, it should be kept in a clean, inert container. Usually we collect it in plastic bags, fresh plastic bags, and the sample should be protected from contamination, damage, and leakage. So we should take the sample in a clean, inert container and protect the sample from contamination, external contamination, any damage and leakage. And immediately after keeping the sample in that container, seal it properly and label it clearly. Labeling is extremely critical. Seal it, label it, transport it to the lab immediately. Within 24 hours, the sample should reach the lab as quickly as possible. The sample should be reach the lab, and immediately we should go for analysis. If you are unable to go for analysis, say next day is a holiday or some other thing, some equipment failure or something is there, then the sample should be stored in -10 degree Celsius. So use clean inert container, then should be sealed properly, labeled properly, transport quickly, and analyze as early as possible. But if it's not possible, then keep it in -10 degree Celsius. And coming to the next step, we have seen experimentation. Next is sampling. Third is extraction. Extraction, the recent method I will discuss later. Extraction, I will discuss about the several methods which are used for extraction. Certain methods are still used, but certain methods are now obsolete. The purpose of the extraction is to transfer the pesticide present in the commodity, whatever be the commodity, say fruit, vegetable, cereal, spices, whatever it may be, from that commodity into a solvent. So that is meant by extraction. So extraction, it is the steps or procedures adopted to isolate pesticide from the sample. So the first thing that we do for extraction is we have a take say vegetable or a fruit. We may have a huge say watermelon, say pumpkin, ash gourd, bitter gourd, snake gourd, etc. We have big fruit. So all these things will be first crushed in a blender, just like in a mixer. Here we do it with a normal mixing. And so more sophisticated labs have more bigger blenders. So that means it will be crushed. And from these crushed samples, we will be extracting the pesticide with the help of solvents. And whatever be the extraction method which we follow, that extraction method should be easily done, can be quickly done, it should be rapid. And that extraction method should use minimum amount of solvent, because solvents are extremely costly and solvents are not considered as an eco-friendly thing, because we don't have any other option. That's why we still use solvents. So try to use as low quantity of solvent as possible, and it should give good recovery. That we have studied, it should give 70 to 120% recovery, and it should be robust. That means even if you repeat it again and again, you should get the same result. So our extraction method should be quick, should use low amount of solvent, should give the recovery within the prescribed limits, and it should be robust. And I told you we will be using solvents. Normally we use solvents such as acetone, dichloromethane, ethyl acetate, acetonitrile, hexane, ether, etc. This selection of solvent varies. In our lab, we normally use ethyl acetate. In certain labs, they mainly go for acetonitrile. These two are the ones which are now most commonly used. Dichloromethane is mainly used for extraction of residues from water. So that is the usual solvents used. But different labs use different kind of solvents. But whatever be the solvent should have certain characteristics. One thing is, whatever be the solvent which you use, that solvent should have high solubility for that pesticide. That means the pesticide which we are trying to extract should be easily soluble in that solvent. Say, take the case of hexane. Hexane is a non-polar solvent. That means it mainly solubilizes lipophilic materials. And acetonitrile, it is a polar solvent. That means it solubilizes water-soluble pesticides. So, if you want to analyze a non-polar pesticide, then you should preferably use a non-polar solvent such as hexane. If you're trying to analyze a polar chemical, then you should use a polar solvent such as acetonitrile. So, depending upon the solubility, you have to choose the solvent. And another thing is that the solvent should solubilize the pesticide, agreed, but it should have low solubility for the interfering substances. That means the commodity, the sample, the vegetable or fruit or cereal or spices should have lot of chemicals inside it other than the pesticide inherently present in that commodity. So if your solvent extracts all those chemicals present in the sample itself, then it will affect your analysis. It will interfere. So our solvent should have high solubility towards the pesticide and low solubility towards the interfering substances. That means the chemicals present in the commodity. And it should not react with pesticide. That means the pesticides should not get degraded. It should have low boiling point. That means we have to evaporate the solvent. In certain steps, we have to evaporate the solvent. So if we have high boiling point, evaporation takes huge time. So we should have very low boiling point. It should be economical. That means the solvent should be cheap and it will be compatible with the analytical method. That means if you are using a liquid chromatograph for the analysis, preferably we should go for acetonitrile because acetonitrile is the solvent which is most commonly used for liquid chromatographic analysis. If you are going for gas chromatographic analysis, you can go for a hexane or ethyl acetate because these two are the solvents which are compatible with the gas chromatography. Are you clear with this?
Yes.
Yes. Then coming to the common extraction techniques, we will see it one by one. The first one is tumbling. Tumbling is one of the easiest way, and this is mainly done for surface residues or dislodgeable residue. So as you know, we discussed yesterday about surface residues and dislodgeable residues. The surface residue and dislodgeable residue, we keep the sample in a solvent that is present in the outside, which can be easily removed. So that's why this extraction method is also easy. So what we will do is we won't crush the sample. We keep the sample in the solvent for 12 hours and just occasionally turning the container. Nothing else. Take a tomato after spraying, say 1 hour or 2 hours after spraying. Keep the tomato fruits in the solvent for 12 hours in a container. Occasionally shake the container. That is tumbling. Then shaking is a bit more vigorous. We use shakers, which are commonly available in a lab. We crush the sample, add the solvent, and we keep it in shakers for 20 to 30 minutes. So as the sample is vigorously shaken in a shaker, the pesticide will get extracted into the solvent. The next one is blending. Blending we go for here we have a machine called as homogenizer. When you come over here, we will show you that rotates at extremely high speed. It has the capacity to rotate at about 15,000 RPM, and very small probe. So it rotates, it breaks the sample and releases all the pesticides. So what we'll do, we'll take the sample, we'll add the solvent and we will blend it in that homogenizer. It homogenizes, finely cuts the sample and mixes very finely with the solvent. That is again another extraction method. Next step is liquid extraction. I will discuss in detail about liquid extraction because that is the method which still it is being used for water, pesticide residue analysis in water. So oxalate extraction, earlier it was widely used, now certain commodities still it is used to oxalate extraction, especially for spices. But nowadays again new methods are used for spices. Solid phase extraction, certain labs for certain pesticides they use solid phase extraction. This liquid extraction, oxalate extraction, solid phase extraction we will discuss in detail. So this is liquid extraction. Liquid extraction. Have you ever seen an apparatus like this? A glass apparatus like this? This one.
Burette.
Yeah?
Burette പോലെ.
Actually, it's not burette. Burette is actually it's an elongated tube-like structure. This is oval in shape, a pear-shaped structure actually. This is called a separatory funnel. Separatory funnel. Varying capacities it come 100 ml up to 1 liter. So here what we use, if we want to extract pesticide from water, we will take water in that separatory funnel. We will close this knob. We will take water. Then we will add a solvent into it. That solvent is immiscible with the water. That means it does not dissolve in water. Dichloromethane is such a solvent which does not mix with water, and dichloromethane and water will form separate layers, and dichloromethane is the one which is having higher density, which will be at the bottom, and water which because of its lower density will be at the top. So we'll close the knob, remove the stopper, first add water, then add dichloromethane, then slightly tilt the separatory funnel. So what we will do is, once you fill the separatory funnel, we have a holder for it, a stand for keeping the separatory funnel. We will add water, we will add the solvent dichloromethane, close it with the stopper, take out this separatory funnel into your hand. So one end, this right hand, we will usually keep the stopper airtight because once you are adding the solvent vapors will immediately fill the separatory funnel, and because of the pressure of the vapor pressure from the solvent, it may bump the stopper. So many times it happens. Whenever you use the separatory funnel, you have to be extremely careful. So immediately after taking it out from the stand, close it, take it out and keep it inverted upside down and open that knob so as to release the vapor pressure. Then close it again, close the knob again, slightly mix it. Again invert it, open it, again release the pressure, close it again, mix it. In a similar way, you mix the water with the solvent carefully. So while we are mixing it, whatever the pesticide molecule which are present in the water will get extracted into the dichloromethane. So once that you mix it for a few minutes, then keep it in the stand, remove the stopper so that the two layers separate, dichloromethane will be at the bottom, water will be there at the top. Open this knob and you can collect the solvent which now has the pesticide. I'll show a few more pictures. So this is the one. So this is the stand. Methylene dichloride is nothing but dichloromethane. This is the stand. This is the pear-shaped separatory funnel. We are pouring the water into it, water and solvent into it. We are closing it. We are holding it properly, and You are inverting it, releasing the pressure. Immediately you have to do it because the separatory funnel will get filled with vapor quickly. Immediately you have to tilt it, release the pressure, then mix it, do it several times, then keep it in the stand, remove the stopper, allow the layers to separate, and then take out the solvent. Are you clear with this liquid extraction procedure?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is the one which I have described. This is just in sentences. Then coming to the next, that is solid phase extraction. Actually, earlier we used to extract with column. We used to have column chromatography. This column chromatography, that means just like a burette, we have a 100 centimeter long tube. We will fill it with an adsorbent, fluorosil, silica gel, etc. I have given that names over here. Alumina, fluorosil, etc. We will fill that entire thing with that alumina and fluorosil, and we will add the sample at the top, and then we will slightly pour the solvents so that the interfering compounds, the compounds present in the vegetable or fruit, will get absorbed onto this alumina and fluorosil, and along with the solvent only the pesticide will be removed. This was the usual thing, usual column chromatography which was practiced earlier. But nowadays we have solid phase extraction cartridges. I will show that picture. See, these are solid phase extraction just like the syringes. And this is ready-made thing. This is very small, depending upon, we get it in smaller size, just the size of a finger and all. And just like imagine about the syringes of different sizes. So, it will get, and it will be pre-filled with that stationary phase, alumina or fluorosil. We don't need to fill it again. So it will be pre-filled. We will get it. So what we will do is, first we will add solvent into it, just in order to wet that stationary phase. Then we will add the sample to the top. So sample is at the top. Then we will add solvent. Slowly, drop by drop, we will add the solvent, and the solvent will remove all the separate out. Actually, this is a chromatographic. Do you know what is the exact meaning of chromatography?
Chromato color.
Yes, that is etymology. Chromatography is nothing but separation of compounds. So here also the compounds get separated. You can see the different shapes. Different shapes indicate different compounds. So these compounds get adsorbed onto this stationary phase depending upon its affinity to the stationary phase. Certain compounds get adsorbed onto the stationary phase. The alumina or fluorosis which is filled into the cartridges adsorb more stronger. Others will be weakly adsorbed. So those which are weakly adsorbed will move out first. Those which are strongly absorbed move out last. In that manner, we can separate out pesticides and separate out all the interfering compounds. These are all the same picture. See, this is a sample which is black in color. Black means it is a mixture of several colors. So this is the stationary phase. So depending upon the affinity of each color to the stationary phase, this, say yellow has least affinity to the stationary phase. So if you add solvent over it, it will get easily moved over to the stationary phase because it is not at all adsorbed onto the stationary phase. So the first we will collect it till yellow, then red has an intermediate affinity, so red will be moving uh, slowly, and second we will collect it, and blue adsorbed very highly to the stationary phase, so it will be moving very slowly. So even it will be coming last with the addition of more and more of solvent. So the black color, which we got it separated out into its constituent color, that is yellow, red, and blue. Similarly, If you have a sample containing a vegetable a pesticide in a vegetable, we can separate out the pesticide from that. This is solid phase. Earlier we were using column chromatography. Nowadays we use solid phase because in column chromatography we used to use about liters of solvents, but here milliliters of solvents is sufficient. So this is a more efficient extraction method. Are you clear with solid phase extraction?
Yes.
Yes. The next one is Soxhlet extraction. Have you ever worked with Soxhlet? Do you know what a Soxhlet means? No. Actually,
sir.
no. Actually, we have a round bottom flask which will be kept over a heating mantle, and above the round bottom flask, we have a glass apparatus. This is a glass apparatus, and this is called the Soxhlet. This is called as Soxhlet. And above the Soxhlet, we have a condenser. In the condenser, we will be moving water through that condenser. So what will happen is that you can imagine over here, see this diagram. We keep the solvent over here, and this three, inside the Soxhlet, we will keep the sample in a paper thimble. That means we keep take a filter paper. In that filter paper, we will keep. I will just show you how to. This is how we make a paper thimble. Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Just with the piece of paper, usually we use filter paper, Wartman filter paper. We use it. Yeah, sometimes we may staple it. We don't know. We don't use cellophane tape and all. Keep it, and we will fill it with the sample, and we will keep it inside this Soxhlet here. Okay. Then we will start the heating mantle. So once you put on the heating mantle, the solvent starts evaporating. Remember, the Soxhlet apparatus is closed over here. You can see there is no opening over here. So whatever be the vapor which is coming out, solvent starts evaporating, whatever be the solvent which is coming out from this round bottom flask, it moves over through this path and reaches the top and reaches the condenser. In condenser, we are keeping a constant flow of cold water, ordinary tap water. Because of the low temperature over here, all the evaporated solvent will get condensed and come out again, and will drop back into this Soxhlet apparatus as liquid. Here you can see it clearly. See, the solvent is evaporating, and through here the the vapors of the solvent reaches into the condenser, and inside the condenser, because of the water flowing through the condenser, it condenses, the vapor gets converted into liquid, it flows, it drops back into this Soxhlet. So slowly, drop by drop, solvent gets start filling in this Soxhlet apparatus. So once it reaches up to this level, it gets automatically siphoned. So you can see it clearly over here. So drop by drop solvent gets filled into this Soxhlet apparatus. Slowly the volume raises. So once it reaches up to this level, it automatically siphons back into this round bottom flux. So this cycles continues. We may run this Soxhlet apparatus for hours to 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, etc. So that means for 4 or 5 hours, you need to use only a single quantum of solvent. That solvent is again reused again and again. So this cycle gets repeated. Because of the repetition of this cycles, the entire pesticide residue will get extracted, and there won't be a higher use of solvents. Could you understand what is Soxhlet extraction?
Sir, little doubt is there.
Yes, what happened?
Um, In that Soxhlet thimble, the sample is there,
Yes,
and the round bottom flask having the solvent.
yes.
Then where the pesticide will be extracted.
In the round bottom flask, whatever be the solvent which is collected at the end of the cycle, say 3 hours, 4 hours, or 5 hours, once we stop the uh, 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 heating mantle, stop the heating, the entire solvent will be collected in this round bottom flask. The solvent will be having the pesticide.
From that, we will again extract.
We will be no, from that solvent we will evaporate, we will concentrate, and then we will use it for analysis. So what we'll do is we'll use a rotary vacuum evaporator, evaporate all the solvent. We will dissolve the water remaining will be dissolved in a small amount of usually say 5 ml or 10 ml of solvent, and then we will inject it into the chromatograph.
Okay, sir.
So this is the explanation. And clean up actually after the extraction. So one thing what Safna just now asked, what will it do after extraction? So we have about say half a liter of solvent after solvent extraction. Invariably, it will be having pesticide and along with co-extractives or interfering compounds. That means the compounds which we have extracted from the sample itself. And that material is not at all needed because that material such as chlorophyll, fat content, oil content, sugars, moisture. Moisture is not at all permitted will damage the instrument. So all those things has to be removed as much as possible in order to reduce the co-extractives or impurities. So for that we go for cleanup step. We can imagine just cleaning up steps. That means removal of all the interfering compounds or co-extract. We call it as co-extractives. That means extracted along with the pesticide. We need only the pesticide. But it doesn't mean that in cleanup we will be able to remove all the co-extractive and we will be able to get only the pesticide. No, a bit of co-extractive will be there, but we will try to remove as much as possible. Just a minute. We'll try to remove as much as possible so that our analysis is more perfect. So if you are using a solvent which has high solubility to pesticide and low solubility to the co-extractives, then cleanup will be more easy. For certain things such as commodities which high fat content and all, this cleanup is extremely difficult because this fat will get extracted into the solvent. You may have to go for then the for certain commodities such as curry leaf. Curry leaf has very high phenol content. This high phenol content is will affect the instrument. So we may have to have an additional step to remove this phenol content. We use activated carbon and all to remove this phenol content. So for certain commodities, we may have to go for certain cleanup steps, specific cleanup steps. Again, the cleanup steps include, again, we can use liquid chromatography, column chromatography. Column chromatography that I told you about, that solid phase extraction and all thing we can use as cleanup steps. Then we can use chemical cleanup. I told you this fatty acids is extremely problematic in analysis. So we use KOH to remove oils by saponification, sulfuric acid to remove lipids, precipitation to remove chlorophyll, pigments, etc. So in certain samples, if these kind of problems are there, sometimes we may have to go for chemical cleanup. And sometimes we may use a chromatographic method called as gel permeation or size exclusion chromatography. This is another chromatography where we separate out the compound based on the size, based on the molecular weight. So that also is, but size exclusion I have not seen anywhere. Literature also I have not seen, but certain books give it. So cleanup steps. Then coming to the Josh's method, which is the one which is widely used now. Almost all 90% of the pesticide residue analysis is done by this method, Quecher's method. Actually, this Quecher's method, it's not a typographical error. It has to be written like this only. And this is expanded as, it is an abbreviated form. This is expanded as quick, easy, cheap, effective, rugged, and safe. Quick, easy, cheap, effective, rugged, and safe. Actually, this was developed in 2003 by a scientist called as Anastasiadis, and every lab, nowhere it is used as such. The basic principle is the same. The basic chemicals which are used in this extraction method is the same, but every lab will change it slightly. So this is called as a quick method because it detects a range of pesticide in a single extraction. That's what I told earlier. We used to analyze one pesticide, two pesticide, maximum 5 pesticides. That was the kind of multi-residue method at that time. But nowadays, certain labs are doing 400 pesticides in a single step. Easy, we can complete the entire process for a sample in 40 to 45 minutes. That's pretty easy. Cheap means we employ very little solvent. That means hardly 10 ml of solvent is needed. Chemicals are a bit costly, but still the comparatively cheap. It is effective means that means the recovery is very good. The results are very good. It will give 70 to 120% recovery. Rugged means for several pesticides, the same method. That's why this method is. See, I told a rugged method is a method which can be adopted in several labs, even with slight modifications. It doesn't affect it. See, original Quecher's method given by Anastasiadis use acetonitrile. But here in our lab, we are using ethyl acetate as the solvent. Acetonitrile was the solvent proposed by Anastasiadis. But in our lab, we use ethyl acetate. But even then, we have used a chemical as such, the major component solvent. Even then, it will give very good results. That's why it is called as a rugged method. That means even if you slightly change the chemicals, it won't affect the results. And it is safe because we consume very less quantity of solvent. So, are you clear with this picture? This is the flow chart of a Quecher's method, what we do.
Yes.
Yes, okay. See, vegetables, as per FSSI, we have to take 2 kg, brinjal, tomato, etc. We have taken 2 kg. We crush it. You can see this is a grinder called as Robo Poop grinder. This is just like a mixer grinder. It's a bigger in size. That's the only thing. It will crush or grind it. Will crushed or ground samples will be kept in containers. From that container, we will take 10 gram into a 50 ml centrifuge tube. We will take a centrifuge tube, bigger centrifuge, 50 ml centrifuge. We will take 10 gram, and into that we will add 10 ml of ethyl acetate and 9 gram of anhydrous sodium sulfate and 1 gram of sodium chloride. Actually, in original Quecher's method, instead of ethyl acetate, we use acetonitrile, but here we are using ethyl acetate, 10 ml ethyl acetate, 9 gram anhydrous sodium sulfate, and 1 gram sodium chloride. Then we will homogenize. This is the equipment I called it as homogenizer. It rotates at very high speed. Once we add the solvent and this salt into it, we will mix it, homogenize it. That means mix it thoroughly. Then centrifuge it at 3000 rpm for 5 minutes at 10 degree Celsius. So once you centrifuge it, we get two separate layers. The top layer will be the solvent, and we remove the top solvent layer. We will get around, if you are using 10 ml of solvent, we get about 6 ml of supernatant. This supernatant will be transferred to 15 ml, 15 ml centrifuge tube. And into that supernatant, we will add 50 milligram of PSA. PSA is primary secondary amine. Primary secondary amine, and 150 milligram of magnesium sulfate per ml of supernatant. That means if you are taking 3 ml of supernatant, we will be adding 300 milligram of primary secondary amine and 900 milligram of magnesium sulfate. We will add into it. We will mix it with the vortex. Again, we will centrifuge it at 5000 RPM for 5 minutes. And since we are using ethyl, as I told you earlier, ethyl acetate is a solvent which can be directly used in gas chromatograph. So for gas chromatographic analysis, whatever we use, we take the supernatant from it, filter it using a membrane filter. I don't know whether you will be able to see it. This is a very fine 0.2 micron membrane filters in order to remove any solid particles, very fine solid particles. We will be removing it into, we will be filtering it into vials, and these vials will be injected into gas chromatograph. This is for ethyl acetate. But this ethyl acetate cannot be used in liquid chromatograph. So what we will do, the supernatant we will take 2 ml of supernatant we will keep it in an equipment called as nitrogen evaporator, wherein we evaporate the solvent. So the entire ethyl acetate will be evaporated. And again, so after evaporating the solvent, only the pesticide will be remaining in that tube. This is just like test tube. We will be adding into test tube and keeping it in the evaporator. Then we will again add solvent into it. Here, we took 2 ml of ethyl acetate extract, evaporated completely. Then again, we will add 2 ml of solvent into it. Usually, we will use, since it is for liquid chromatography, we will use a solvent which is compatible with liquid chromatograph. So here we use methanol, acetonitrile, or whatever solvents which we commonly use in liquid chromatograph. And we will mix it again with a vortex and again filter it. What before injecting we have to filter it. Both steps, both liquid chromatograph and gas chromatograph, we have to filter it. So I will repeat. Take the sample, crush it. From the crushed sample, take 10 gram, add anhydrous sodium sulfate 9 gram and sodium chloride 1 gram. Then homogenize it, centrifuge it, take supernatant into 15 ml centrifuge tube, add primary, secondary amine and magnesium sulfate, mix it thoroughly, centrifuge it. This supernatant, since we have used ethyl acetate, the supernatant 2 ml of supernatant can be directly filtered and taken it for GCMS analysis. And ethyl acetate is not suitable for liquid chromatography. We will evaporate the ethyl acetate, and once the ethyl acetate is completely evaporated, we will add a solvent which is compatible with the liquid chromatography such as methanol or acetonitrile. The same quantity, if you're taking 2 ml for evaporation, we will add 2 ml of solvent, again filter it and inject it in liquid chromatograph. Are you clear with these steps?
Yes, sir.
Bindu might be familiar. Have you done
Yes,
this?
sir.
Yes,
In your
sir.
practice? Yes. Okay. There is in Velaini they are using acetonitrile, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that's why I called it this method as the same. The salts, say sodium sulfate, sodium chloride, primary, secondary amine, magnesium sulfate, all those salts which are using are the same. But we are changing a solvent, but even then the results will be the same. So that's how this method is a rugged method. So what is the purpose? We are using several chemicals. What is the purpose of each and every chemical? First, I will give one more thing. Then I will move into the purpose of each and every chemical. See, up to this step, it is an extraction method. That means adding ethyl acetate, anhydrous sodium sulfate, sodium chloride, centrifuge, homogenizing, then centrifuging, and by that time all the pesticides will be extracted into this solvent, supernatant. This is extraction. From here onwards, it is cleanup step. So Kersher's method, the extraction and cleanup is combined. So that is Kersher's method. And let's say the purpose of each reagent. Then primary, secondary amine. Actually, primary, secondary amine is coming in the cleanup step. The purpose of primary, secondary amine is to remove all the fatty acids, organic acid, sugars, the matrix. That means the cleanup material. And this is method is called as dispersive solid phase extraction. That means you know what is solid phase extraction, wherein we have a stationary phase kept in a syringe like material. Here whatever we use is primary secondary amine, which is added to the solvent itself, and we will mix it so that the primary secondary amine will absorb all the co-extractives. So it's a cleanup thing. Anhydrous sodium sulfate, we are adding at the second step, cleanup step. It is mainly meant to remove the water content. See here our experiment to reduce water content, to remove the water content. In some cases, we may use acetic acid or sodium. In our step, we are not using sodium acetate. For certain commodities, we may be forced to go for sodium acetate to adjust the pH, but here we are not using it. Acetonitrile, in original Kirchhoff's method, acetonitrile is used because this is a solvent which has all the desirable character, which can extract the pesticide. It is less soluble to the co-extractives, and it can be used in LC and GC. GC it's not commonly used. LC for GC we don't usually use, and we can readily remove water. Then sodium sulfate and sodium chloride. Both sodium sulfate and sodium chloride. See it over here. This is in the extraction step here. Sodium sulfate and sodium chloride. Once you are adding sodium sulfate and sodium chloride in the extraction step, because of the high content of ions, sodium ions, chloride ions, and sulfate ions, the pesticide molecules will be moved out of the substrate. That means moved out of the sample into the solvent. This mechanism is called as salting out. Salting out. We add high amount of solvent, high amount of salt, and because of the high concentration of salt, what happens is this salt, these ions in the solution will try to bind to the attached to the substrate, say tomato, bindi, or any vegetable or fruit. So while we are, it tries to, the ions will try to attach to the substrate. The substrate will be already having the pesticide. So this high concentration of ions, what it will do? It will knock out all the pesticide molecule from the substrate, and the ions will be binding onto the substrate. So what will happen? The pesticide molecules which are bound to the substrate, which will get knocked down, and it will get solubilized in the solvent. That's how this addition of the salt will help in efficient extraction of pesticide. Okay. Any clarifications? Are you clear with Kirchhoff's method?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, then tomorrow, hopefully we'll have 2 sessions. Morning, I will try to finish off the analytical methods. Afternoon, we will have 1 or 2 small sessions. Then I may need 1 hour or 2 hours for completing. Next week we will complete. Okay.
Okay.
One more thing before leaving. One more thing. Go into Moodle today. I have uploaded in the pesticide residue analysis section. I have uploaded several videos from YouTube. Try to go through that YouTube videos and then attend tomorrow's class, because certain things it is difficult to explain, especially mass spectrometry. HPLC and GC it's slightly easy, but mass spectrometry is slightly difficult in the, if you're trying to explain quadruple and all is slightly difficult. So try to go through it, view it at least once today night, so that your classes will be easy tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.